This is Behind the Headlines, with behind-the-scenes analysis on issues affecting Pennsylvanians, sponsored by the Susquehanna Valley Center for Public Policy. Now, here's your host.
Hi, welcome to a new edition of Behind the Headlines. I'm Maura Donnelly, and I'm filling in today for Charlie Greenwald, who's on assignment. He's a very busy man. I'm very fortunate to have with me today my co-host, Ann Womble. Welcome, Ann.
Thank you, Maura.
Ann is a member of the Board of Directors of the Susquehanna Valley Center for Public Policy. She's also a trustee at Millersville University, and she's the executive director of the Lancaster Dollars for Higher Learning. Mm-hmm. Did I get everything?
That's right.
It's very nice to have you here today, and especially with your background. For our guests, we have back with us today one of our favorite guests, Ken Mash, who's the president of APSCUF. Welcome, Ken.
Hi, Maura. It's great to be here, and it's good to be here with you.
And he brought with us, with him, a very special guest, Olivia Straka, who is a senior at Shippensburg University.
Yes, hi.
And we're going to have an opportunity to talk to you a little bit too, so welcome.
Thank you. Yeah.
It's great to have you both here today. We've got some big funding issues to talk about for higher education. So, Ann, I know you have the first question here today, so.
Sure, I'm happy to start. Ken, as our audience probably knows, over the years, state funding for our state system schools has been cut, now down to about 25% of state funding. Can you explain how this affects faculty and the campuses and their ability to manage?
So when the state system of higher ed with our 14 universities, when it was originally created as the state system, the state picked up about 75%, as you were saying, of the cost of a student's education. Now, with cuts that have taken place in recent years, it's down below 25% at most of the schools. What happened was in 2011, amid the Great Recession, there was a reduction in 18% of the state allocation. Every year since then, we've been totally flat funded. So we have not seen any increases. In fact, I think we're only one of 3 states in the country at this point that has not restored some money to higher education since the Great Recession. This year, we were very fortunate, we think, both the governor and the legislature were in kind of an agreement that we should get an increase. It was not the kind of increase that the governor was originally saying. He was saying that in the next 2 years he wanted to totally restore those cuts. But they did reach a compromise in which they said they were going to give us a 5% increase, which would have made up about $20 million of the $90 million that were cut. So we thought we were going to be going ahead, but unfortunately it all got caught up in the entire budget mess that's been taking place in the Commonwealth. And when the governor wound up line item vetoing and blue lining the budget, he took down our budget back down to flat funding, I think with anticipating that they would return again at some point and give us the increases. So how at the universities, what this has meant is, and I think the most important thing is that you could plot that as the state allocation decreases, tuition has increased. So I mean, it's almost a direct inverse relationship between state allocation and tuition. So that's put a really big burden on our students, on their families to be able to afford to go. Student fees have been increasing even beyond the rate of tuition too. And even with all those increases, there still isn't enough money for the universities to operate as they had been operating before. And the system and our universities have been very responsive. We've lost, hundreds of people working at the universities. We have lost 90 programs across the state that had been there before. Students are having a harder time getting into their classes. Faculty have had to, pick up workload. But I want to leave a chance for Olivia to talk about some of that.
We do want to talk specifically about the impact that it has on the students, but I want to ask Olivia a general question. How has your educational experience been at Shippensburg? You're a senior, you've been on student government, sounds like you've been very active. How has that been, and what exactly do you want to be when you grow up?
Right. Wow. That's a good question. I wish I knew.
And are you working in that direction?
So my experience at Shippensburg has been relatively amazing. I think it's one of the best state schools, if I can be a little biased. And I think the time on student government, as a student, if you get involved, you have a direct hand in some of the things that Kat is talking about. I have a personal relationship with many of the Board of Trustees members, and we are voting as students on the different fees and whether to raise them, and we are right in the trenches about conversations with tuition. We do have a say,
wonderful.
as students, which is wonderful. Yeah.
And so what do you want to be when you grow up?
I don't know.
Okay,
Something
that's
in
okay.
politics, I suppose. Something to try to fix these issues.
You're off to a good start,
right?
then.
I hope so. Yes.
Okay, so specifically, how have you felt this crunch, this impact of the budget issues over the last several years?
Right. So the budget has changed a lot since I've just been a freshman in college and been able to see the change. I think that what a lot of people don't understand is that as our funding goes down, the students really do feel the impact. And I mean everything from our class sizes have exploded to professors, really feeling the strain. I know a lot of professors that have multiple jobs, even, tenured professors. And as that funding goes down, it's even hard to find money for food. There are a lot of students that are having issues with feeding themselves, and even transportation and getting home for breaks. Things like that have really been impacted.
Wow, that's pretty significant.
Yes.
How would you say that the higher health care costs and the pension obligations are also factoring into the university's ability to manage the budget on campus?
With the state system, we're kind of in a unique position. They do feel some of the pain of the pension costs, which everyone has felt throughout government. But our faculty, at the very least, the majority of our faculty are actually in they're not in the state retirement system. There are alternative retirement programs, which are sort of like 401ks, and so employees at the universities get to pick which one they're going to be in. So that the effect is there, but it might be muted a little bit at the universities.
What do you expect in the upcoming negotiations?
Well, we've been in negotiations. Our contract actually expired June 30th. I think, I think we're both trying to be patient and see where we land, about how much money there is there, and to come up and work cooperatively to get a contract that's fair to the faculty and serves our students the best it possibly can.
So those contracts are directly impacted by the lack of a current budget.
Well, it would have to be.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very clear. I mean, when I talk to a lot of people, and they'll say things like, well, the university's got to cut the fat out of the system. Well, we've been at this now for 5 years after a pretty dramatic cut, and there's not real fat there to be cut, and it doesn't matter whether you're a liberal or you're a conservative. When you look at those budgets, they're tight, right? Anything that gets cut now is a matter of cutting into bone. So if we're cutting, it means that we're going to be increasing class sizes beyond, where anybody agrees that they should be. We're going to be starting to eliminate core programs, which one would expect that would be there at a university. I mean, I've been here before, and we've talked about, how difficult it is to get a foreign language at a university now, because there have been these cuts that have taken place, and it's not just foreign languages, it's in the humanities, it's in other programs as well. So any cuts right now really would be stark and would ultimately wind up hurting our students.
Well, we're already bumping up into the next budget without having resolved last year's budget. Right. I mean, this is not news to anybody who's watching. It's been kind of a mess. Do you find yourselves playing a dual role of trying to restore what you wanted for last year and also, advocating for some sort of increase in the next year budget? It's got to be a lot of work right now.
So I don't know that there's even a transition point anymore.
I know, that's what I'm saying.
We're sort of moving.
Rolling into one at this point.
It is all really rolling into one. So we continue to speak up for our universities. And for our students at our universities, and say that yes, even for this past year, we do need the increase, and yes, we need to work towards getting even more next year. We really need to get the bump up to that around that restoration number. Even the Board of Governors, which has been very reluctant to press the Commonwealth for more funds, has said, look, we had a $90 million cut. We need more than the 90 million at this point. We need probably I think they asked for about 110 million. So they've been extremely reluctant to say, we need much, much more. And they've been working with these budget gaps year after year after year, but they're even saying, look, we need to get more money for our students, and we're on board with that. And we're going to take action and work with whoever we can to make sure that happens.
So we have a budget on February 9th, and we have some sort of rally occurring on February 8th. Olivia, do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So, actually, Ken, why don't you?
Sure. Which is fine.
Well, Olivia, has been a student. I know last year we were in contact. She actually approached us because she wanted to know, as a student, what could the students do. And so we had thought about that and worked off of it, and we're planning to have a rally on February 8th. It's called United We Stand, Underfunded We Fail. Yeah. And we're looking to bring students in. We're going to have cooperation from the state system, too, and administrators and alumni and everybody who wants to show up. And that is the day before the governor's budget address. Yeah. So we just want to bring attention to our students and to our universities.
And where's it going to be held?
It's going to be in the Capitol Rotunda. Okay. And I think there's going to be a link down the screen even that's going to show where you can go to if you're interested.
So people can get some additional information. Well, as we finish out our segment, we never have enough time here, but Olivia, do you want to tell us a little bit about how you think students can become more involved in these issues that are facing the universities?
Sure. So I know for a lot of students, coming to Harrisburg and being able to attend a rally is difficult, just to get here with transportation. But talking to your administration, I think a lot of students, they view the president of the university as, unreachable. And we go to a state school because it's a community and because you can talk to your administration and your board of trustees, and they are available for communication. And I think that understanding that they are there for you as a student is really important. So just having the courage to talk to the administration, talk to your fellow students, and definitely your professors is a way to really mobilize and to get things done.
Oh, that's great advice. Well, we'd like to thank you both for being here today. We expect this to be an ongoing issue because we're still battling the budget. So hopefully someday this will be resolved, and we'll be able to talk about happy things like the foreign languages coming back to schools, which would be wonderful. So thank you very much for being here, and join us in just a few minutes for the next segment of Behind the Headlines.
Behind the Headlines is brought to you as a public service by the Hospital and Health System Association of Pennsylvania, helping hospitals provide healing, health, and hope to communities across the state. And by the Pennsylvania Business Council, envisioning a Commonwealth in which residents enjoy a very high quality of life in sustainable communities. The Council works aggressively to define key long-term policy strategies and solutions to make the Commonwealth more competitive, creating and sustaining a better Pennsylvania. Additional underwriting provided by the Worrell Corporation Foundation, based in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, by the Edward H. and Jeannie Arnold Foundation, and by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business. Behind the Headlines is also supported as a public service by Daily Express, transporting construction, farm, and industrial equipment throughout the United States, and by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Visit pahighwayinfo.org.
Welcome back to the second segment of Behind the Headlines. On this segment, Ann and I are joined by the wonderful Dave Patti, who is the president of the Pennsylvania Business Council. Welcome, Dave.
Hi.
We always enjoy having you here because we can always cover a whole broad array of issues facing Pennsylvania. So let's start with the most obvious one, and the first one. What the heck is going on with the budget? We're bumping up right into the 2016-17 budget, and we still don't have a final 2015-16 budget.
Well, and to some degree, that's in the eye of the beholder. There are Republican lawmakers, especially in the House side, who will say, we gave the governor a budget, he chose to line item veto parts of it.
So we're
That's
done.
on him, not
Yeah.
on us.
Yeah.
And in fact, he cut some $2 billion in education funding, some $2 billion in Medicaid funding, half of the corrections budget. And they may let him stew in his own makings there for a few months. I'm not suggesting that's a good thing or a bad thing, but
Seems to be the
it
direction
could
they're
happen.
going in. Yeah.
Now, there are other parts to a budget, like the fiscal code. And so, as we're taping this, the House has passed, but not the Senate, a fiscal code bill. And what that does is really give specificity to how the money appropriated in the budget actually gets spent. So one of the issues in there was, how do the school districts get the billions of dollars that they are now entitled to?
So there's still a little bit of work left.
Oh yeah, there's still
Okay.
work there. And then if we go back to last year, which seems like truly last year, there was at one point that framework which said, well, we're also going to address public pensions and we're going to address liquor privatization. So those issues haven't been taken care of.
Do you think that what we'll see with the governor's new budget address is more of the same, or are you expecting any surprises with the new budget?
Yeah, I think it's the Who song, meet the new budget, same as the old budget.
Yeah.
I suspect he will go back to the same themes of structural deficit, of education funding, of looking to do more in medical and human services, and probably some of the same funding themes like Marcellus, although given the price of natural gas, his tax proposal doesn't generate the revenues it would have even just a year ago.
So pension reform, will it be on the agenda for the
It
governor?
has to be. Well, I think it has to be. I think for the
Yeah.
business community, that's item number one. And I would say no matter whether you want to expand spending or cut taxes, we've got to do something about public pension reform. On the state and teacher pension issue, going into the end of the year, we were at some $50 billion as a deficit, and how much should be in there. Given the way the markets have performed so far in January, who knows where we are now? I don't want to know, because 10% is $5 billion.
Right.
And the markets are down that much. So, I mean, that's frightening of how fast that problem is growing. Less attention is paid to the problem of municipal pension issues. And while the dollar amount's not as big, the impact on those individual city and municipal budgets is huge. It's
yes.
bigger. There are people who are predicting, for instance, Scranton has 2 years to go before they're bankrupt, before they go the way of Detroit, if we don't get their pension under control. And they're not the only city in that boat. So we have to do something there. The hybrid plan that was floating around just before the year's end is kind of a half a loaf. It's partly defined contribution, partly defined benefit. It's not as far as I think a lot of reformers would like to go, and that was part of the House Republican rejection of it before the holidays. But it's better than where we are now.
Good.
Speaking of the General Assembly, there seems to be a lot of legislators that are announcing that they're either retiring or departing. What are your thoughts on that?
They're dropping like flies.
So the process in Pennsylvania politics is that you have to first circulate a nominating petition. So it's common for the lawmakers who are not going to run to give the courtesy of letting people know, at least with a couple of weeks' notice, hey, I'm not planning on doing it. Generally, have tipped off some friends in advance so they can get their nominating petitions ready. I do an exercise every 2 years that people see as mystical, where we have a list that we say, we're not saying they are retired, we're not saying they should retire, we're saying they're old and they have a lot of years of service, likely proxies for retirement.
It's based solely on the numbers.
Correct,
Right.
and I just rank them that way, and yes, those who are leaving are largely on my list. Mike Vereb this week, a younger Republican with just 10 years of experience, has announced that he's not going to seek re-election, but most are in their 60s and have been here 10, 12, 20 years, even or more. So that's their retirement age. But to your point, I think if you look at them too, a lot of them moderates, and I think if you press them, a lot of them would say, it's just not fun anymore. I'm tired of this. We can't get anything done. And because they are older and have more seniority, well, because of more seniority, not their age, but their seniority, it also means they're the committee chairs or they're in leadership. So the appropriations chairman from the House, Bill Adolph, phenomenal lawmaker, is hanging it up. Sandy Major, who's in leadership, is hanging it up. Mike Vereb had been in leadership before. Other committee chairs, the Labor Committee chair, Maury Gingrich here in the Mid-State, has announced her retirement. There's a few people who are retiring, like Lloyd Smucker down in Lancaster County, who's going to run for Congress instead. Pat Vance in the mid-state, Senator Vance, will be missed there as well. So I mean, you're going to have a transformation of the legislature next year in two ways. One, that you will have new committee chairs and leaders, but also I am fearful that what it means is on either party, you're going to get more extremist. You're going to get people who are either farther to the right, farther to the left, and that doesn't bode well for future gridlock.
Wow, so it's pretty far-reaching, the impact of all of this.
Yeah, and I don't know what the numbers will be yet. I mean, 20 is about average, which in 253, 10%, that's attrition is not bad. But it could be a year like 2006, where not only did people lose in the primaries, but to forestall that, and that was, of course, after the 2005 pay raise, but some, I think 2630, retired voluntarily.
There was a very big turnover that
Right.
year, yeah. Interesting. So what sort of business issues do you think the business community will be tackling this year in the budget, besides pension?
Well, I mean, we start with pension. I think for a lot of us, we still continue to say liquor reform, and part of that is a philosophical belief that that's not a business that the state should be in. But I think that in the budget debate, too, it makes a lot of sense for those who say, look, at a time when you don't have the resources you need or want to spend on things, what do? You sell assets you don't need. Well, here's an asset we don't need, shouldn't have, however you want to characterize it. It has value, let's try and unlock that value. And I think that's part of the thing that's made this this budget debate difficult. Isn't that people have been wrong, but that everyone's been partly right. I would say that the governor is absolutely right to say that there is a structural deficit, that the cost to carry is growing faster than the natural growth of revenues with the existing tax structure. I agree, and our organization agrees with the governor about more money for education. Now, we want some accountability to go with it to make sure the kids can read, write, do the math, are college and career ready. But we support the increase there. I think it's also true that a lot of people have not. Well, maybe the country is in a technically in a time of recovery from the recession. A lot of people out there aren't feeling it yet. Their wages have grown a little bit, but not as fast as the cost of healthcare, not as fast as the cost of putting a child through college, not as fast as food cost. So while energy prices are down and kind of keep inflation in check, a lot of things that people have to spend money on have gone up tremendously, farther than their wages. And they are going to say, look, I don't care if you're trying to tell me it's only $4 a paycheck or $10 a paycheck in taxes. I don't have another $10 per paycheck.
Right.
So I mean, that is also true. And it is true that, as we've talked about, the pensions and the liquor issues. So there are lots of views that have been part of this whole budget discussion up there that aren't the traditional, one side versus the other. They're parallel instead. And it's how do you satisfy all of those parallel demands?
Wow.
What is the business community's view on expansion of the sales tax?
Well, it depends on which business you're in. If you're a retailer, it's not good. If you're a retailer who's in a border county, particularly in the southeast bordering tax-free Delaware, it's very not good. So that goes to rate and to the services. To expand the tax base onto other services, and this is something that Republicans had wanted to do in order to fund property tax reform too. You're starting to talk about things like education services, medical services, pharmaceuticals, trips to the doctor. The governor had proposed college textbooks and dormitories and cafeteria plans, funerals, but it also gets into things like services such as legal services or accounting services. Now, the governor's plan last year would have continued the business-to-business exemption. So if I have to buy legal services as part of what I do to finally make my profit, they'll tax me at the end, not at each stage. But somebody who wants to go take care of a will, a divorce, that would have been taxed. It's one of those things, if you sit down with a bunch of economics professors and said, we're starting from scratch on a tax policy, they would probably say tax services as well, because that's where the economy is. It's the transition from that. It's the fact that other states don't do that. It's what's the nexus.
It becomes a competitive issue.
Yeah, it becomes a real competitive issue, and so it's problematic. I understand the theory behind it, but sometimes theory and practice are two different things, and so moving to the sales tax would be a problem. And it hits some businesses more than others, obviously.
What would be what you would call the ideal tax mix, if you will, between personal income tax, sales tax?
Well, trying to get me
business
fired here. So the official
We
answer
won't
is no
tell anybody.
taxes. Yeah, just between us. The personal income tax in Pennsylvania is a very, very low rate. Now, in fact, among states that have one, it's the lowest rate. Now, our base is different than for a lot of other states, so our effective rate is actually a little higher than our statutory rate. Most states start with your gross, or your adjusted gross income from your federal tax line, which is winnowed down from where ours is. Ours is there's more income that's included in there, and you don't get some deductions. The problem with our personal income tax is that from the business side, it goes to small businesses. So sole proprietorships, partnerships, LLCs, LLPs, S corporations, and they don't get the deductions that their comparable firms do in other states. So they don't get net operating losses, they don't get like-kind exchange, they don't get bonus depreciation. If you did some of those things for small businesses to put them on the same plane as small businesses in other states, then I might suggest that the PIT, because it has the highest rate of compliance, it's like a 99% rate of compliance, the lowest cost of collection, it is fair across the board. It frankly leaves a lot of seniors out because it doesn't apply to pension income or Social Security income, so it gets their dividends and interest. But for seniors only on a pension, it's not going to hit them, or low income people who don't have other taxable income, it's not going to hit them. So in that regard, it is if there's a good tax, again, going to theory, it's a good tax. It's problematic as it hits small business, and that would be our objections there, and there are ways around that.
Okay, so in our last few moments, you and I typically have an opportunity to prognosticate at the end of the year, but we didn't get to do that, so let's do a little bit of that. Super Bowl bound, who's going to be Super Bowl
Steelers,
bound?
obviously.
Steelers, you think? I think so too. How about the Pirates? How are they going to do this year?
You know, I have not paid attention much to the hot stove, off-season stuff.
Yeah.
But you got to hope that they keep going strong.
Yeah, they've had some really good years. They tend to,
Right.
in the clutch, they have a little bit of a problem at the end of the season. Well, Dave,
Phillies are going to be a great AA team.
you heard it here first.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for being with us, Dave. As always, we really enjoy having you, and we look forward to having you back again to see how the new budget is working out.
Great, thanks.
Thank you.
I'd like to thank Ann for being with me today. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Join us next time for a new edition of Behind the Headlines.